All right, so first of all, today we explored the dynamics, the landscape and cyber threats, the challenges that we face in terms of critical infrastructures. I think the expert panelists will discuss strategies to minimize risk, enhance sustainable resilience, and ensure seamless protection across all sectors, yeah? I think let's dive right into it. Koketso, given your experience with information security in Africa, what according to you is a unique challenge that you face as a cybersecurity professional? Does the continent face today, and how do you approach these challenges at Bayobob Africa to maintain, let's say, a robust cyber resilience?
Thank you for that, Mohammed. I think that's a very, very good question. When I start thinking about most of the challenges that we are faced with, I think the most important thing that comes to mind is the challenges we face with limitations around infrastructure. When we start thinking about when we try and maybe deploy various solutions and we thinking about infrastructure, on-prem that is, there's a lot of limitations around that. There's a lot of challenges around infrastructure availability and so forth. So that becomes a huge challenge, especially when we want to deploy security solutions. Now, I think in my opinion, what we're trying to do, especially in our organization, is to try and work towards looking at cloud-based solutions. I think that helps us address that specific challenge around infrastructure and also gives us a bit of flexibility. Now, the other one is the shortage of skilled cybersecurity professionals. And I'm going to speak specifically also around females. That's another, huge challenge that we face. And when looking at that, it becomes challenging to actually build a robust security team because of that shortage that we have around skilled professionals. It's hard to actually build that specific team that has the different skills available. I'm very big on upskilling. I always, whenever I speak to the team or whenever I get the opportunity to speak, I speak a lot around upskilling because in this field that we're in, it's very important to ensure that you keep up with the different changes that take place. There's a lot of threats that are forever, the threat of landscape is forever evolving. So it's just very important to ensure that we upskill so we can keep abreast with all the different changes that take place. So again, apart from that, as professionals, cybersecurity professionals, we need to ensure that we are kept up to date with regards to what's happening around the world, around the cybersecurity field. And I think the other challenge that we face also is the increasing cybercrime rates. Cybercrime is forever increasing. From the usual phishing, that is still very relevant. It happens, we still have attacks that take place via phishing, and then there's ransomware, and then we also get the more sophisticated attacks where there's they're targeting our critical infrastructure. So that is still one of the challenges that we face, which is why I think it's very important to develop a multi-layered security approach so that we're able to address all these different attacks as they arise. And I think finally, when looking at addressing various cyber threats or challenges that come with that, for us to remain resilient, it's very important to ensure that we focus on integration around people, processes, and technologies. Because, firstly, when you start talking about people, awareness is key. I always also like saying that we can have all these different tools, these different solutions in place, but the moment our users are not well trained, all of those become futile. Because still, in this day, it takes just that one user to click on that phishing link or so, and then we get compromised. Now, thinking about processes also. It's very important also to ensure that our processes, procedures are kept up to date. We need to ensure that we continuously improve our different processes. For instance, like incident response planning, incident response plans or so, we need to ensure that those are kept well up to date. And lastly, I think when we refer to the technologies, it's always good to also ensure that we move with the times, we adopt all these different advanced technologies. I think right now, I think the whole afternoon and morning, we've been hearing a lot of talks around AI. You know, there's that proliferation around AI. So it's very important for us to try and move with the times in order for us to respond to threats in a swiftly manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Koketso. So a multi-layered approach would probably be one of the solutions, and skill development is what I understand, yeah? All right, moving on. Resham, I think given your stature in the industry, and help me understand, how are advancements in machine learning, you know, and AI transforming the way organizations like Vodacom Group especially predict or mitigate cyber threats? And could you also provide, let's say, a recent example of some kind of an implementation?
Hi, thanks for that. Yeah, so I thought about it in 3 ways. I think one big thing that we need to invest in is the data. So most CSOs, etc., don't see it as a data-driven type of solution. So the first thing what we do is we invest quite heavily into our data lakes, our data infrastructure, and the quality of data that we bring into our platforms. That's number one. So once we have the data and we've got a lot of them in place, it unlocks the second layer quite easily. And it must be quite a robust platform, a platform that can grow quite nicely. It's flexible, it's obviously secure, etc. But has the capabilities for streaming, real time, etc. So that's the first big key component. Without it, you're not going to be able to unlock the rest. The second piece, which is around being able to leverage this data. So there's 2 parts that we can do with it. Is most security systems that we have today have a lot of the data capturing capability, and they come with kind of plugins. But what we do differently is that we take a lot of this data and we segment it the same way we do our customer profiling. So the way we understand our data from our customer perspective, we do the same in terms of our log data, our SIM data, etc. So that's the first layer on the second piece, which is giving that real-time capability of understanding exactly what's happening. And the second is, it depends on how you want to approach your machine learning layers. You can buy off-the-shelf products, you can build your own products, you can do a hybrid of both. But you need to get that right and have the landscape to actually explore around there. So just coming off that example, that if you can foresee trends for phishing, you can actually understand which customers or which kind of segments or infrastructure will be targeted beforehand, test it, develop A and B testing campaigns to confirm your hypotheses, which gives you further insights in terms of trends and how to work proactively towards trends. So that's the second layer. The third layer, which I share a lot with Koketso, is around the people. Because previously you had a CSO and you had a whole lot of security engineers and specialists, and now you're asking them to supplement it with data engineers, machine learning engineers, data scientists, data analysts, which is not always the conventional way. So it has to change the way you view things strategically. Meaning there has to be a CSO talking to a CDO and your CIO all coming together in order to come up with a congruent plan in order to do predictive as well as your response times and your recoveries, etc. So those are the main 3 layers that we worked on. And we've actually implemented some of this already for some of our markets that we have in Africa as well in SA. Our key big focus right now is point number 1, where we're driving a lot of the data, investing into the platform, making sure that we have robust data platforms that we can leverage off. So those are the 3 key places, but it's also a continuous journey. So because of machine learning cycles, you got to keep getting better as you go along.
Wonderful, okay. So unless you want to give out complete details on how to implement the rest?
No,
all right, so...
I'll take a sidestep of that.
Perfect. Okay, moving on. Rene, I can see that you oversee cybersecurity efforts across diverse regions, APMEA, yeah?
Correct.
Okay, so help me understand, what differences have you observed in the cyber threat landscape in APAC, the Middle East, Africa, and how does this influence, say, your strategies in these areas, Wipro strategies?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting topic in the, if I peel it back to the basics, it's all about motivation and opportunity. And what that means, if you look across the RSMUs, the Strategic Market Unit being APMEA, it's, if you take a geopolitical perspective and a socio-economical perspective, geopolitically, you would have nation-state threat actors, so foreign interference, acts of war against critical infrastructure, and how we're seeing governments approach that is a whole-of-country approach, and that includes sound cybersecurity strategy, critical infrastructure legislation that enforces certain security risk management processes, frameworks, to continuously measure, maintain and assess your critical infrastructure, understand your critical infrastructure assets. That's the convergence of RT and OT, etc. And so we're seeing a huge upsurgence in terms of the government's responsibility across the whole region, understanding that risk, coming up with a strategy to deal with that risk, and most importantly, taking a whole-of-country approach where it includes not just critical infrastructure, because that is the geopolitical threat landscape, but also the socio-economical impact, which is the human element, so your citizens. What we're seeing in the socio-economical side, and I'll take Australia as an example because that's where I'm based, our biggest, I guess, attack threat vector there is really attacks against citizens, because that's where the attackers are getting the financial return. So in the case of the Optus breach, Singtel's written off $140 million US based on the breach, part of $1 billion write-down, right? So they've said 140 is based on the breach, and in immediate line of sight, but putting aside $1 billion, right? What did the hacker get out of that? Nothing, right? Except, Interpol intervention. I'll give you a case study where a mum in Australia was scammed out of $500,000, right? So you can say, protect your critical infrastructure, put all the investment behind it, get the governments involved, get all the industries involved. So in Australia, we have 11 industries in critical infrastructure across banking, logistics, energy, etc. So there's an approach that we have to share intelligence from a government's perspective, so government sharing intelligence across those sectors, but then also how do we protect the citizens? And so we're seeing, a huge, influence in terms of how you approach that from where, let's say, banks are not only now sort of doing security awareness around their users, but looking at how do we educate our customers, right? So emergence of multi-factor authentication has become mandatory almost, right? There's no app that you can use. If you're using a service that doesn't provide you 2FA, I'd be highly suspicious of their security posture, right? So because the human element is where the reward is for the hackers. So the approach around that is where we're seeing, whether it's the geopolitical, socio-economical impact within the region, it's how do we work with our customers to take that whole of nation approach. So in Australia example, we're the fourth highest GDP in the whole of the APAC region. Sorry, the eighth, but we've got the fourth highest GDP per capita and the fourth highest in terms of the age people live to, right? So targeting old people in Australia is a great attack vector. So then you say, well, how do we help banks educate people to be, and so even in banking in Australia, to get cash, example, the tellers are taught to ask certain questions to ensure that people aren't transferring money to someone else that's sort of, scammed them out of their money. So it goes to sort of the complexities of working with the clients, understanding, example, in critical infrastructure, if you have a risk management framework, then how you're going to measure, maintain your infrastructure. And we work with our clients to understand their maturity, work with our clients to understand how we can help them uplift their capability. And then ultimately, how do you manage and maintain, continuously monitor that infrastructure? So It is really, in terms of how we approach it, we have a holistic approach where we see these vectors are different in each region, but we see a unified approach where through intelligent sharing, whether it be within the sectors or across the region, we could be more responsive to the attacks.
So perhaps not a one-size-fits-all strategy.
Oh, definitely not, no.
Okay. With that being said, I think regulatory frameworks play an important role.
Excuse me?
The regulators play an important role.
Yeah, massively, because historically it was more sort of an acknowledgement that, yes, as a country, the regulators need to, let's say an example, banking was always strong in regulation, right, globally, where you see the regulators now pushing heavily into different sectors like energy, telcos, where they are forced to, and the repercussions of not doing so are significant financially. Directors have personal liability if an organisation gets breached. The director takes accountability, the board takes accountability, purely because look at the impact, right? Brand, reputation, outage, it's significant risk. So the legislation has to be crucial to drive change.
Wonderful, okay. Now, I think this morning Nitesh mentioned in one of his speeches that the group CEO for Accenture received, the group CEO had an incident where the finance head of Accenture received a video from the group CEO, apparently, so to claim, a deepfake video asking to transfer a certain amount of funds, right? I want to understand, in the interest, or how rapidly these cyber threats are evolving, how do you think, what is the most important measure organizations should be taking in order to avoid falling prey to such acts?
Question to
Either
anyone?
or. It's for the panel.
Look, deepfake is, I'll answer a bit of this. Deepfake is obviously a huge emergence, and that's purely an AI-driven sort of anomaly. Not anomaly, a trend that's emerging more so. I said to my clients something simple. I mean, it may seem so simple, but within your organization, have a means of 2-3 levels of verification. Even so educating people around deepfake. So you change your education process through the evolution of the threat vector. So historically it was phishing, and phishing, by the way, is still the highest attack vector globally, and as so in APMEA too. So it's not going away, it's evolving now to being deepfake, that sort of thing. It used to be whaling, now you have vishing, which is voice phishing, which is now evoluted into that sort of deepfake. It's having a process, and very solid, robust processes through education, and ensuring those high levels of transactions, whether it be moving money, signing off certain documents, follow very strict processes around authentication. So we talk about authentication as in username, password, but authentication as in terms of the process of communicating that sort of transaction between the right leadership team. So, what you know and what you have, so don't rely on, let's say, email alone, rely on other channels that only you selectively 3 or 4 people in the organization know about. So keeping that sort of the crown jewel secret, but in that process.
Yes.
I just want to add to that. Look, that's the offshoot of what AI and machine learning can actually do. But coming back to thinking about what is this metric we can think about, it's a difficult one, because how would you measure potential loss in this rapidly evolving technology landscape? So it's like having a discussion of saying, I could potentially lose 100 million, but I've got 100 million investment to make in terms of our infrastructure, training, processes, etc. And then tomorrow it changes. It's an ever-growing challenge, right? But being able to weigh out that potential loss with potential investment, that's one of the metrics you could potentially use. But again, it's quite difficult. That's just comments from my side.
Right, okay. Thank you, Resham. Now, again, with the rapid evolution of cyber threats, how important is cross-sector collaboration, like say in enhancing cybersecurity, and what steps do you think should different critical infrastructure sectors take to achieve seamless connectivity and protection? Again, the panel.
Happy to take it, okay? I'll start. Just listening to that, when you speak about the importance, I honestly think it's not even a conversation of importance, but it being absolutely essential, given the different cyber threats that we're facing today. I think it's really important for that cross-sector collaboration, because I don't think there's any single organization or sector that can actually fight the fight against cyber threats alone. So that collaboration is absolutely necessary, in my opinion. I think it's also good to try and develop platforms where we are able to share intel around threats. I think if we've got those different platforms across different sectors, we're able to have that shared threat intelligence where various sectors or various members of different sectors are able to learn about different threats out there. And I think as a result of that, we are able to respond better, especially when we're looking at it from different views. If we've got that collaboration now, we can perhaps optimize resources. People from different sectors are able to bring in their own expertise, and now with that, we are able to plan, the way forward of how best to approach the different threats that we faced with, how to defend against them. And I think it also helps us learn to be proactive as well in the fight against cyber attacks and everything else that's happening. I think it's also important also to encourage the use of advanced technologies, as Resham was speaking, around AI. I think it's very important. We need to learn to move with the times, also adapt, and then learn to use the different advanced cybersecurity technologies that we have in place. When you were mentioning what Nitasha was speaking about this morning around the deepfakes, I think that is also something that we need to learn a lot about and learn how to respond to such. And I think it also brings me to, again, what I was mentioning earlier around the awareness with our people, because something like that will be very difficult for somebody to respond to, especially if they're not well trained. If you're well aware of what's happening, the latest threats like deepfakes that are recently, when there's a surge around that, our users now know better, and they can always verify and check if you're getting all of a sudden a video from the CEO asking you to transfer this and that. I mean, firstly, you ask yourself, why would the CEO be sending me a video for this? You learn to actually question these sort of things that seem out of the norm, abnormal, and as a result, you learn to actually not fall victim of these sort of attacks.
Right, well, thank you, Koketso. Anybody else would like to add?
Yeah, I just want to add a note that most attacks are also not people-driven anymore. It is AI. So I agree with you that we need to also get a lot of AI-driven type of technologies to fight back in these type of threats that come through. That's the first thing. And obviously the challenge is what we just spoke about, is that you've just now invested in it's a security infrastructure, and you're now saying, okay, now I need to have an AI infrastructure coupled with a data lake. It makes things quite more complicated, but we need to rapidly evolve with the complexity of our attacks that come through as well. So just wanted to add that.
Right.
Yeah, I think, the key here is don't do anything in isolation. You're going to fail miserably. If sectors can collaborate and have threat intelligence, because you all share the same problem, right? Your critical infrastructure, your threat vectors are similarly quite similar. Your infrastructure has the same challenges. You have aging technology. You have backdoors and I guess vulnerabilities similarly. So doing that threat intelligence sharing is critical. You can do that through third-party providers, but as a sector, you need to come together. So never do anything in isolation. But also, I tell a lot of my customers, my customers, your customer kind of syndrome. Everyone has multiple bank accounts. If you have a Telstra, Optus, or whatever phone account, typically we'd all have the same. All my friends similarly have the same insurance. As a collective, we're all the same customers. So if, example, like Medibank in Australia got breached, 9 million something credentials, customer information was breached, what we've realized through that process is that we as a sector need to come together and say, we need to share that information, right? What information was breached, we need to share that securely and in a way we can protect the private individual's information, but use that information so those organizations can preemptively understand who are their clients that are breached, what is their sudden threat vector, right? What is their mechanism to respond to that, and how do they proactively and preemptively as well, avoid that cascading effect of that breach data. So you need to come together not just to prevent the attack vector, but come together to then protect your citizens. A joint responsibility.
Right, okay. Well, thank you, Rene. I think the learning from this particular question is collaboration is key. Everybody has to come together. And I think personally being a part of the digital transformation journey in the continent for the last 8 years, this is one sentence I've probably been hearing from day one, that collaboration is key. Like everybody has to come together to tackle it together. With that being said, I think with the number of attacks, recent incidents that the continent has witnessed, one of the most significant ones is the one that happened to Kenya Airways. Are you guys aware?
Sorry, which organization?
The Kenya Airways. Okay, so the cyber criminals basically breached the airline's information system, and this attack resulted in unauthorized access to sensitive data, including contact details and identification documents of people who've dealt with Kenya Airways. Just to link to that, in that context, help me understand sustainable resilience, right? What are some of the best practices or innovations that have significantly minimized risks in respect to Vodacom or Bayobob?
Yeah, it's the same thing over.
Yes.
We invest in the data, we invest in our machine learning capabilities. That has been one of the biggest leverage points that we've been using.
Okay.
It gives us the strategic advantage because we've seen data as a strategic mechanism, not just for revenue generation, but for capital avoidance, for loss avoidance, and all those type of mechanisms. So we kind of shifting to take data quite seriously and coupling it with the business domain knowledge that we have. So if you're in cyber, you will use it to leverage, cybers or limit the loss. If you're in a customer environment, we'll use that to leverage revenue. So we use it as an underpinning type of lever that we pull in our various business units in order to gain what we need or to minimize that type of loss. So that's how we kind of do it. We've been also sharing a lot of knowledge internally. So the same way you would prevent fraud, you will use a very similar way of thinking to actually prevent a cyber attack or to pick up a potential attack. So it's a kind of the same thinking that happens in the back, but we have the underpinning technology with the data and the right processes around it.
Right, okay. Yes, Rene.
Okay, all right. When I start thinking about some of the, best practices that we've tried to adopt is we're trying a lot to move away from some of the traditional solutions that we've been using. One being VPN. We've been trying to, in fact, we're doing that. We're moving away from VPN and trying to adopt the practice of zero trust, where instead of giving access to everything when people log into VPN, as what used to happen, we're trying to ensure that users only get access to only what they need to, and after they've been verified and so forth. Because from hearing what you just mentioned now around the Kenyan Airways attack, it sounds a lot like something that had to do with authentication bypass. And I think when we try and use or adopt the zero trust architecture model, we try and ensure that users only have access to what they need and nothing else, practicing, the principle of least privilege. So I'm now thinking of that specific scenario that it's probably a case of that where an attacker managed to get access to maybe somebody who had access that they were actually not supposed to have, overly privileged access or accounts and so forth, and that's how they probably managed to compromise that. So I think that's one of the things that we're looking at. And in addition to that, we also, some of the best practices that we're looking at, or innovations also, is around cloud-based security solutions. I think that's helping us be more flexible. I think I mentioned it a bit earlier, around the tools that we deploy. And that also helps us protect some of the cloud applications that we have. In addition to that, I think it's also very important to ensure that we are constantly updating our various plans, procedures, and so forth, which is what we also have been doing or working towards doing also on a regular basis. And again, probably going to start sounding like a broken record, but people again and awareness. I think I've already spoken enough about that. Hopefully I don't mention it again later. But it's very important to ensure that people are well trained. And I think it's something that we can never say that we've done enough of. It's something that we continuously trying to improve on, trying to see how we can do it differently or do it better. And that's one of the things that I always try and work towards. We do a lot of that within our organization around awareness and training and trying to continuously improve that as we improve all the different ways that we remain resilient.
Yeah, so within APAC, Middle East and Africa, in the telco sector, Zero Trust is actually the biggest priority, right? So SASE-based solutions, so secure access, secure edge, is certainly the way the industry is going, but specifically telcos are really embracing it, most importantly in terms of their cybersecurity strategy. Look, there's ways of protecting data and mitigating that risk, well-known ways, encryption, data segregation, role-based access control, et cetera, But it's also understanding now of managing your data. So too much data is not good, right? Get rid of the data you don't need, basics of the data that you do need, segregate how you leverage that data in a digitized world, attack service management, understand your APIs. The more open you are, the more digitized you are, because you have customers that want to access your services. That's the whole intent and the whole point. But through APIs and apps, ensure your APIs are protected, understand where your APIs are, understand where your domain names are. You have to take a really holistic approach. So yes, it's the data inside your core assets, but there is 100 ways to get to that data. So, and there's well-known mitigation strategies, but we need to leverage, to your point, the evolution of where we're at today with Zero Trust, AI, leveraging cloud. Telstra in Australia has a cloud-first strategy now. They want to shift all their payloads or workloads to the cloud. The reason for that is, one of the key reasons I'm speaking to other telcos in the region, is the vast amount of infrastructure they have to protect and manage, and the amount of investment to do that, right? So one of our telcos that we manage has 170 security platforms. I'm not talking about boxes, I'm talking about platforms. Their key issue here is how do we have all the best of class in terms of all the stuff we buy and manage and maintain to protect our infrastructure and OT environment, but we want best of suite. Right? So that's cloud, leveraging cloud security controls and cloud security providers that are well trusted, and then you understand your third party and fourth party risk in doing that. You do it responsibly, but you can certainly leverage cloud, embrace it, where you're going to get AI, you're going to get machine learning, you're going to get threat intelligence sharing, you get instant response, you're going to get it all there, right? So why try build it yourself? Is really, it's just understand your risk of doing so responsibly.
Well, thank you, Rene. I think to sum it up, starting from Resham to investing in the right infrastructure, to moving on to having favorable regulatory framework, or a customized strategic approach, or skilling or upskilling, the right professionals. I think if I were to ask all of you to give me just one line to take back as a learning from this panel. Koketso, to begin with you, what do you think that would be?
I wanted to talk about people again. I don't know if I can. I think I've already said enough of that, but I think I still will, because as I already mentioned, over and above everything else, the technologies and everything, I'm very passionate around awareness and training people. And I think it's very important for us to try and change the way we train our users. There is a conversation around AI and everything else that we do, which is, that is also very great. We need to adapt to that, but we need to ensure also that we find different ways of training our users to ensure that they remain engaged. How I always try and advocate for that is that I try and emphasize that we should make cybersecurity fun again. Training should be fun, so that people don't see it as, that other thing that they need to do and so forth. My manager always refers to me as the FBI, because apparently when people look at me, I'm just that policeman who's here to just check that everybody's doing the right thing. And a part of me doesn't really like that, because I want people to be more engaged when it comes to everything that has to do with cybersecurity, so that they can actually take the lessons that we give them and they're able to practice them, because it becomes pointless if we try and train users. We give them all these different trainings they need to do, right? But if they aren't really practicing that, then, again, it takes that one user to click on a phishing email or link, and then we get compromised. So I think my parting point would be, let's make cybersecurity fun again.
Thank you, Koketso. So basically, skill up, skill reskill, do whatever you want. Just make sure you create that awareness. Perfect. Rene, let's go with you.
I mean, mine would be, I think, short and sweet. I'd say go to your board, your CEO, CTO, etc. Ensure you have between 10 to 15% of the IT budget for cyber. If you have anything less, I'd be worried. Make sure your board and your leadership team understand when, and not if, when you get breached or there's an incident, how do you respond as an organization? What is your policy on ransomware? What is your policy around media, and what are you going to say to the public? How are you going to respond to that? How are you going to do brand protection, minimize the fallout? What's your legal stance? Who's your legal liaison? Are you going to pay for legal privilege when you deal with third-party providers to come in and try to help you work out what happened? These are very expensive processes to work through. So understand your policy, understand how you're going to deal with it. So yes, there's the IT budget. Do cyber well, do it healthy, continuously evolve, embrace technology, but plan through that resilience topic you spoke about. It's also how do you respond to it.
Very subtle. Thank you. All right, moving on. Resham.
Yeah, it's just one liner. I think it's AI for everyone. I think the more we learn about it, the more we understand it, the more we get to understand how it works. Because things are changing, as you mentioned, the older generations, etc., don't realize there's deep fakes and deep voices, etc. But if that awareness is driven, not just from a cybersecurity perspective, but from an AI perspective, it's like how we understood electricity. Now we understand AI. If you bring that type of awareness, it solves a lot of problems going forward. So that's where I'm going to say it and stop, because it obviously can go on for days where we talk about it.
AI for everyone, yeah? All right, thank you so much. Thank you for bringing the wealth of knowledge that you did. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you. We're moving on to the next segment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.